Chapter 12 is titled Yasmin's Story. After discovering the fate of his night books, Alex was too upset to sleep. He couldn't stop thinking about the hours spent writing each story. The shock of discovery when a new chapter stepped out of the shadows. The frustration when a plot withered and died. The sheer bliss of unearthing the perfect word. The writing had been agonizing at times, but it had also been wonderful. Now I have nothing to show for it, he thought. More than anything else, Alex regretted not sharing the stories when he had a chance. He pictured a graveyard with the words, "They died unread," etched into each tombstone, and felt the mixture of guilt and loss. Unfortunately, resurrecting the stories wasn't possible. Alex might remember some of the plots and characters, but piecing them back together again would be like reassembling a cracked eggshell. No matter how hard he tried, the stories would never be the same. There was no time to grieve for what he had lost, however. Without those night books, Alex no longer had a stockpile of stories from which to draw. His situation had become more perilous than ever. How many stories do I have left? How many days before Natasha no longer has use for me? Alex needed to know. He sprinted to the library, suddenly convinced that the final night book had also been torn to bits, and sighed with relief when he found it safe and sound on the desk. Alex carefully flipped through its pages, taking stock of the stories that he hadn't yet read to Natasha. He found one that would work, and then a second that he had abandoned midway through, thinking it was a lost cause. Alex read it again. Sometimes he would revisit a draft after a week or two and find that it was a lot better than he had originally thought. Unfortunately, this particular story had not improved. In fact, it was even worse than he remembered. He continued flipping. There were 2 more stinkers, and then another story near the back of the book that wasn't half bad. 2 stories. That's all he had left. Okay, Alex said, pacing back and forth. No big deal. I just have to start writing again. Plenty of time. Alex sat in front of the open notebook and smoothed down a fresh page. Despite his lack of sleep, he felt energized. He hadn't written anything in over a week, and he was excited to make up for lost time. This is going to be fun, Alex thought. He picked up a pencil and started to jot down some ideas. 3 hours later, Alex was sitting in the exact same position. The gears of his mind, which normally spun like a well-oiled machine, felt clogged with molasses. He couldn't come up with a single good idea. The harder he tried, the more difficult it became. He remembered another turn the Miss Coral had written on the board. Writer's block. Alex hadn't liked that one nearly as much as interior logic. At last, someone knocked on the door. Alex leapt out of his seat to answer it. "Good morning," Yasmin said. She looked different. For one thing, she wasn't wearing her Mets cap. Her long hair, still wet from a recent shower, fell straight down her back. Gone, too, were the work clothes she normally wore, replaced by jeans and a faded green t-shirt, a size too big for her. The difference in Yasmin was more than just her physical appearance, however. She stood straight and proud, with the relaxed confidence that Alex had never seen before. He felt like he was meeting the real girl for the very first time. "Hey," Alex said. "Hey," Yasmin replied. There was a stone mortar filled with a gray paste in her hand. She held it out like a new neighbor delivering a pie. "I made a poultice from some of the plants in the nursery. I figure you might have a ton of bites and scratches from yesterday. This will help with the pain." "Thanks," Alex said, taking it. "That was really nice of you. If you hadn't taken the blame for what happened yesterday, I wouldn't be standing here right now. It seemed the least I could do." It was no big deal," Alex said, fighting a blush and losing. Any kind of idea of what spell she was going to cast on us?" Yasmin nodded. "We'll get to that," she said. "Can you take a break for a few minutes? I know you have a lot of questions, and I figure it's time someone told you the story for a change." She nodded towards the nasty gash on his hand. "But get some of this polish on it first. It looks really bad." Alex did as she suggested. The pain instantly started to fade. Wow, he said, already smearing a substantial amount across the second wound on his forearm. How'd you learn to make this stuff? I thought Natasha only sold oils. This isn't for sale, Yasmin said. It's for her prisoners, in case someone gets hurt. She wants them up and about as quickly as possible. There are oils to be made, and in your case, stories to be written. She took a deep, lingering breath like a student before a final exam. You want to sit down before I start? This could take a while. Hold on, he said. I'm dying to hear your whole story. I really am. But first, he raised the mortar. There's someone else who needs your polis much more than I do. They found Eleanor curled up in the corner of the kitchen. Her orange and black fur was spotted with blood, but at least her tail looked better. The stone that previously encased it had shattered, littering the floor with pebbles. Alex bent down beside her. Hey, Eleanor, he said softly. I have medicine. It'll help you feel better. The cat managed to raise her head a few inches off the floor and hissed. It was as fearsome as air leaking from a bike tire. At least we don't have to worry about getting scratched, Yasmin said with reluctant sympathy. The poor thing can barely move. Alex dabbed a bit of the polis on 2 fingers and lowered it towards the bite mark on Eleanor's stomach. The cat vanished. I can't help you if I can't see you, Alex said in a parental tone. When Eleanor didn't reappear, he added, have it your way, and smeared the polis in the general vicinity of the bite. At first, the cat squeamed feebly, trying to avoid his touch. After a few seconds, however, she grew suddenly still. See, Alex said. It feels better, doesn't it? Now stop being so stubborn and let me do this the right way. Eleanor turned barely visible, like a light at its dimmest setting. Fine, her expression seemed to say, but this is all you get. Alex gently smeared the polis over the cat's wounds. Eleanor stiffened when he touched some of the nastier spots, but for the most part, bore his touch without complaint. Can you do that and listen to me at the same time? Yasmin asked. I've been holding everything inside for so long, and now I feel like I'm going to explode if I wait any longer. Alex nodded in understanding. He often felt the same way when sitting down to write a story. Maybe we should talk somewhere else, he suggested, looking meaningfully at Eleanor. He lowered his voice in a whisper. She might be out of it, but she's still listening. Anything you say. This is all the stuff that Natasha knows anyways, Yasmin said. Nothing in this story will get us in trouble. Okay. Yasmin started to take a seat and then changed her mind. She paced back and forth across the kitchen floor. As she walked, she tucked her hands beneath her chin and wrung them together. My first night in the apartment, I cried my eyes out, Yasmin said. I had no idea what was happening. All I knew was that this woman had tricked me to coming inside, and now I was trapped. It wasn't until the next morning that I learned I wasn't alone. There were 3 others, Eli, little Han, and Claire. She smiled sadly, remembering. They taught me what I needed to do. Eli was in charge of the cooking. Han did the cleaning, and I learned how to tend the plants in the nursery from Claire. She was a year older than me, with a big smile that could light up an entire room. She had been Natasha's prisoner the longest, but she hadn't lost her optimistic attitude. She kept saying if we were stuck together, everything would be all right. Except they're gone now, Alex thought, so everything didn't turn out all right. He sat perfectly still, no longer tending to Eleanor, just listening. Part of him was riveted, but the other part wanted to cover his ears before Yasmin's tale took an inevitable turn for the worst. For the first time in his life, Alex understood why some people stopped reading a scary story in the middle. At night, we took turns reading to Natasha from one of the books in the library. All of us except Han, that is. He really didn't know how to read. After Natasha had gone to sleep, we'd huddled together in Claire's room and tried to come up with an escape plan. Eli, who was kind of a hothead, insisted that if we charged Natasha at once, we could tie her up and then she'd have to let us go. Claire disagreed. She didn't think we stood a chance against Natasha's magic. She said we would just have to be patient and wait for our opportunity. It would come. Han didn't say anything. Mostly, he just clung to Claire. Sometimes he'd cry, and she'd rock him to sleep like a baby. How about you? Alex asked. I was Team Claire all the way, Yasmin said. And everything. We only knew each other for a few weeks, but it didn't matter. Living through such a horrible experience pushes you together a lot faster than regular life. She became my sister. Han and Eli, my brothers. I'm not saying I was happy. None of us were happy. But at least we had each other. Silence settled. Alex realized that Yasmin had reached the most difficult part of the story. She wouldn't continue unless he nudged her forward like a reader turning a page. Tell me what happened, Alex said. She looked up. Her eyes were wet with memory. I don't have to tell you. I can show you. Alex left a handful of Fruit Loops by Eleanor's side and followed Yasmin into the living room. She stopped in front of an antique china hutch and studied the porcelain children lining the shelves. Alex followed her gaze. Until this point, he hadn't paid much attention to the figurines, but now he noticed that there was something off about their gleeful expressions. The smiles look forced, he thought. Like when a photographer takes too long to snap a picture and you have to keep smiling whether you want to or not. Alex shivered as the truth hit him. These are the kids who lived here before us, he said, wondering why he hadn't figured it out earlier. Natasha turned them into little statues? Yasmin nodded. That's Han, she said, pointing to a figure of a small Asian boy sitting in a rocking chair. He was holding a stuffed rabbit. In the end, he couldn't keep up with the work like the rest of us. Natasha finally lost her patience. And there, Eli. Yasmin pressed her fingers against the glass inches from a raggedy boy with a mop of blonde hair. He was smiling like all the others. Alex supposed that was the creepy side effect of the spell. But his eyes were shut tight in one final act of defiance. He went ahead with his plan and tried to jump Natasha when she least expected it. No, it didn't work. She knelt down, her eyes level with the bottom shelf of the china hutch now. Alex identified Claire before Yasmin even pointed to her, a pretty girl drawing water from a well with eyes that radiated kindness. She looked like someone who would grow up to be a teacher or a nurse. In the end, it was just the two of us, Yasmin said, me and Claire, until one day there was a knock at the door. That happens sometimes. We get visitors, grocery delivery, landlord, neighbors, even the police from time to time. Not since I've been here, Alex asked. I'm sure people have come, only when Natasha's not in the apartment, we can't even hear the knocking. And they can't hear us either. It's like there's a wall between us and the outside world. But that changes when Natasha's home. Occasionally, she has to let people inside. If not, someone might grow suspicious. Alex wondered if his family had ever knocked on the apartment door of 4E. Maybe he'd been standing on the other side of the wall at the time, just a few feet away. That day was different than usual, Yasmin continued, because we were actually expecting a visitor. The pipes in the kitchen sink had been leaking for a week, and there wasn't anything that Natasha's magic could do to fix it, which was a little bit funny. She had finally called the plumber. Claire and I did as we were told and stayed in the nursery. We could scream and shout all we wanted to down there, but no one would ever hear a thing in the apartment. While we waited in the dark, Claire took my hand and told me the truth. She had broken the kitchen pipes herself, knowing that a plumber would have to come. There was a note taped to the underside of the sink explaining everything. It begged whoever found it to send help as quickly as possible. That was a good idea, Alex said. It was, replied Yasmin. Only Natasha figured it out somehow, and when she unlocked the door to the nursery, the note was in her hands. Yasmin cleared her throat. Claire didn't even talk her way out of it. She spent her last minutes making sure Natasha knew I hadn't been involved. Yasmin looked drained, like someone recovering from a long illness, but not nearly as sad anymore. By sharing her story, she had shared a portion of her grief. So now you know, Yasmin said. That's why I was so mean to you in the beginning. I didn't want to risk getting close to somebody else and losing them again. I'm sorry. She hugged him. Alex hugged her back. It should have been weird and awkward. I mean, she was a girl after all, but it wasn't that way at all. It felt right. They were still trapped, but they were no longer alone. Can the spell on your friends be reversed? Alex asked when they parted. You know, like in a fairy tale, when the witch dies and everything goes back to the way it was in the beginning. This isn't a story, Alex. Claire had it right the first time. All we can do, really, is be patient and hope something changes. She peeked into the kitchen to make sure Eleanor hadn't moved. I agree with you about the blue mist, she whispered. I think it's what keeps the witch young. For all we know, Natasha could be 100 years old, maybe thousands. We're just kids. How can we hope to outsmart her? Alex stared at the figurines through his ghostly reflection in the glass. He remembered what Natasha had said on his second day in the apartment, when she was on the verge of casting the spell that would have added him to her collection. Just be a doll and stand still, and whatever you do, don't close your eyes, like a photograph. It gave him an idea. Are those the same outfits that your friends were wearing when the spell was cast on them? He asked. Why? Just go with it. Yeah, Yasmin said. Those hideous smiles are fake, and I doubt that Claire ever got water from a well in her life. But everything else is right on target. Look, you can even see Hans' little watch. He always wore that thing. Good, Alex said, scanning the figurines more carefully now. That means it should definitely be here. What? Yasmin asked. I'll tell you in a second. He traced his fingers along the glass, trying not to rush. If I'm right, he thought, this changes everything. He searched the figurines once and then a second time just to make sure. There was no question about it. No one was wearing a unicorn pendant. She promised that she would never take it off, Alex thought with rising excitement. That means she isn't here. Natasha never turned her into a figurine. There's a way out of this place, he said. I don't know how yet, but I'm positive it can be done. What makes you so sure? Alex smiled. Because I know someone who escaped, he said. And that's the end of chapter 12. So we will read 13 and 14 tomorrow. I'll see you guys later. Bye.